All right, so what does success mean to you? If you look at Webster's dictionary, success is defined as a favorable or desirable outcome. And I think almost all of us have achieved something that we've set out to achieve at some point in our lives, only to find that it didn't bring the fulfillment that maybe we were hoping for. And so as Christians, I think we need to look at this whole idea of success a little bit differently. And in this video, I'm having a conversation with a good friend of mine where we're discussing this concept of biblical success and what it looks like to define success as a Christian. And I'd love for you to join us in this discussion by adding any comments and thoughts that you have down in the comments section below. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get to it. So now, in terms of success and succeeding at things, this is something I've struggled with. The world's view of success is very different than God's. And, and this can be like, this doesn't necessarily need to be business or entrepreneurship. This is social media. This is how many followers do you have? And this person has more followers than you, and therefore you feel like they're more successful than you. And I mean, and this applies to everything that's all around us. Everybody's always trying to measure and size up other people based on these levels of perceived success. And it's challenging. And I'm just curious, like, if you have found any ways that have helped you kind of just work through this to define real success.
Yeah, it's like real success. It's funny because I remember at a point thinking, if I just made this amount of money, then I could feel like I could relax.
Yeah.
And when I was working the corporate job and we were in debt, I remember thinking, if we just paid off our debt, and then we paid our debt, and it was like, okay, it still doesn't feel like enough. Yeah. Or if I could just make six figures, that would solve all of our problems. And then you make six figures, and then you start hanging around people who are making, multiple six figures, and you're like, oh, well, what's wrong with me? And then it's this
never-ending
constant
cycle,
chasing the wind. It really is. And you realize, okay, I don't think there's any amount of, physical gain that'll ever happen to make you feel like you're enough or that you've arrived. Even though, and that's still a daily battle for me. I measure very heavily, I feel like, my self-worth based on how my business is doing, or if I had a bad launch, or if things aren't going well, I feel like I'm not worth as much, and that's so wrong. Yeah. But I'm glad you brought this up, because I think most people will struggle with this at some point, and it's just this feeling of you are enough regardless of your success in business, of what you're succeeding at or failing at.
Social media followers.
Social media followers, how many, and it's like, okay, so you've got this big social media following. You've got a lot of people that like your stuff. So what? Is that really what you're measuring your worth on? Of something that, I challenge a lot of guys that are, running businesses and masterminds. It's like, if we lost everything business-wise today, how much would that affect your feeling of self-worth? Yeah. And for most of us, it's like, oh gosh, that would be tough. And just having that healthy dose of reality of what defines our worth. Yeah. And as a Christian, it's God says I'm worth it. Yeah. And that really is all it has to be.
That should be it.
And that should be enough. Yeah. And anything that we feel like internally that we're trying to ease our pain or become, more than, or it's just going to be this vapor that is, you're never going to be able to quite attain it.
Yeah. So you and I both read, it's True Measure of Man. Is that the title of it?
Yeah.
So how did that book affect you and your thoughts of all of this?
Oh man, yeah, that book that affected me a lot. It's one I try to read at least every year, at least once, sometimes twice, just to keep me grounded in the right thinking of. The book just talks a lot about the true measure of a man. What is the true worth of a man? And I think as men, especially, we do put a high emphasis on, our ability to succeed, or even, physical, how strong are we? Are we in shape? Do we have
taking care of our families and
all the things that and if we're not providing well for our families financially, does that mean our measure? Do we not measure up as much? Yeah. And it really is just about it's none of that. It's what God says we're worth, and thinking bigger picture too of legacy, and fast forward to the end of your life, and then just get a snapshot of and look back and think, did you leave a mark? Did you leave a legacy? What are you going to be remembered for, from your wife and your children? Yeah. And is it just somebody who, you worked, you provided well, but all of a sudden that becomes oh, well, that doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah.
And even from somebody who's, seen death close up, and I've lost both of my parents at a rather early age, and I've just gone through that, and I realize the importance of what really matters. And, it really is the relationships, the help that you can give other people, and what you do for God. And those are the things that last. I mean, I remember, my dad died. He was an entrepreneur, never really succeeded in terms of financially. He tried a bunch of things. His work ethic was always there, but he never really hit that thing. I never for a second thought about that as in terms of, man, I miss my dad. Too bad he didn't make more money. I never cared about that. And I try to remind myself of that too with my kids. Like, they could care less how good my business is doing.
Yeah.
They just want the time. They just
really
want
good.
the attention. And that's what you want to be remembered for.
Yeah.
And it's easy as men especially to remember that, pull back, stop striving and pushing so hard, and to just honestly fast forward. It sounds kind of morbid, but fast forward to your deathbed and think about your life. And then if there would be any regrets, like if you feel like, oh, I think I'd have some regrets, we'll change it now. Yeah. That's how I try to live. Like, just fast forward. Do you feel like there'd be regrets on what you're doing right now? Yes, there would be a little bit. Yeah. Okay, let's tweak that.
Yeah, something I put on my wall at my office, I put this question on the wall. This is somewhat related, but the question is, what if Jesus came back today? And it's just a constant reminder for me to think beyond the noise of the day and to think of, am I doing something that is glorifying God? Am I doing something that if today was my last day, that this is how I'd want to have spent my last day?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And just kind of recalibrating my focus on that it's just helped,
Absolutely. And sometimes it is just a heart issue, and sometimes it's like it's easy to get way off there and be like, well, gosh, if Jesus would come back today, then what are we doing? We need to go out and start,
you're absolutely
preaching on the street or something. That's what we should be doing. And you throw away everything. You're like, no, sometimes what God has called you to do is exactly what you're doing. Or if you're an accountant out there right now, God has probably called you to be the best accountant you're doing, and so work. I love that verse, just like work as unto the Lord, whatever you're doing. And even in the corporate world, I tried to do that and think, I'm not making a difference here. What am I doing? And I was always reminded that God's like, you're not working for your boss or you're working for me. Yep. And that would change my whole work behavior too. I'm like, wow, okay, let me really grasp that. And if I was really working like for God, he was going to come in and check over. Would I be working the same way? Yep. Would it be working with the same amount of excellence? Yeah. So I try to apply that even with what I'm doing now. Sometimes you feel lazy, or, oh, I'm just going to take a shortcut. Yeah. Or there's a gray area, and you're reminded, no, I'm working for the Lord, so utmost integrity and all those things. And I think if you're keeping that right and you're keeping that in your heart and in your mind, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I think Proverbs says that in all labor there is profit, and I think I'm just assuming, I'm making this assumption that when you're working heartily under the Lord, that is always true. And you know what I mean? I feel like that just kind of validates that whole thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I want to... Ooh, got a good reflex there.
Wow, that's not...
Got a good reflex. I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing. So Scrivener Coach was the first business that you started. That was the problem that you solved. Super niche. So Scrivener is this super helpful software for writers if you're writing a book or really anything, right? Yeah. And then you created a course to help people use it because it's kind of complicated.
Yeah, there's a learning curve for sure.
All right, so that's kind of what you started with. Tell me what else you're doing and really just how you can help anybody who wants to write right now.
Yeah, sure. So everything started with this course called Learn Scrivener Fast. Basically, the big pain was that it took too long to learn Scrivener. So we made a course, help people learn it quickly, easily. And then I really just fell in love with the audience of writers and serving them, which is what I always recommend for folks getting in business now, is first find the audience. Find out who you want to serve and what problems do they have, and find a solution. And then if you can offer that solution, that's what makes business. Yeah. And so we've been on a mission really to just help writers from day one of conception of whether it's a book, whether it's a nonfiction book, fiction, just getting their message out, because we've realized how important that is, of leaving legacy. We've talked a little bit about that. A lot of folks want to do that through a book, and nowadays it's easier than ever because we have things like self-publishing and we can do so much. And so And we have a lot of writers have a lot of struggles, a lot of mental battles to overcome,
yeah.
and there's a lot of rejection involved with that.
They're creatives, and
Oh,
I think as
yeah.
creatives, that's just one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us face.
It is, and I'm always passionate about the psychology behind those things and helping folks as much as possible. So we've created several courses for writers along their journey as a writer, from idea to publishing and how to deal with everything in between. And so.
That's great. All right, so where can people find any of this?
You can find me on Twitter, probably the easiest there. @Scrivener Coach is my Twitter handle there. Our main course, Learn Scrivener Fast, lives there, learnscrivenerfast.com. And we're getting ready to launch several new things, and so,
That's awesome.
keep a look out for that.
All right, well, thank you for sharing. Glad to chat with you about all this, and we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, great chatting.
All right, I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, we'd love it if you could leave us a thumbs up down below just to let us know. And on our channel, typically we talk more about money, and we talk about how to manage money using biblical principles, and we talk about some of the practical strategies and how to do it wisely, all the stuff that we should have learned in school, but we actually never did. So if that's something that resonates with you, definitely consider subscribing so you can hear from us as we create more content like that. But that is all for today, so have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.